Welcome everybody to another edition of Blue Bear Quilts Live. Today I'm participating in another Designer's Tips and Techniques that's going on today, tomorrow, and Thursday. It happens from 12 p.m. noon to 8 p.m. where a different designer is giving their tips and techniques every hour on the hour. Where you will find each of the designers will be in a previous blog post where I've listed them all out, and you can just click on the link and go right to their page. You also will be able to go backwards and watch the videos that have already taken place. So if you would be sure to follow me or subscribe wherever you happen to watch this, and if you'd give me lots of thumbs up and hearts and likes and all that good stuff, I'd really appreciate it. So today we're going to be talking about fussy cutting. What is fussy cutting? That's where you center a design and you cut around it so that you still have a good representation of that design. And I'd like to show you some examples. All the quilts that I show you today are available on my website, except for the first one, the wall hanging that I'm going to show you. This particular quilt we're not talking about today, but it is called Fit for a King. So in this first wall hanging, you can see in the center here, we have a little heart where it's been cut out with Quilts-Fussy cabbage fabric, and so I cut it out specifically to get the cabbage in there. This next quilt is our Seahorses in the Reeds quilt, and it's made with QT Fabrics Oceana line. Now when I bring it in closer, you will see that there are some seahorses, and they could be fussy cut out. You'll also notice that the block is on point. Now I didn't actually cut these on point or fussy cut, and I'll explain that later. This next quilt is our Snapshots quilt, and it is a very good example of fussy cutting. So when I bring it in closer, you're going to see how all of these little squares have been fussy cut. See how like just the motif is showing up in the picture. That's exactly what we want when we're fussy cutting. So you can see all kinds of different things that have been fussy cut in this particular quilt. So here are some more examples. Here's where I fussy cut out a little bird. And then here's another little bird. Here we have Snoopy in this block. This block has a tiny little puffin that's been cut out, and also this border was also specifically cut out. There's many different elements of the fabric that were fussy cut in this particular block. This is from the border. These little cow skulls were part of it. This is also part of the border. So many different parts of the fabric were fussy cut. And I hate to say it, but I'm afraid some quilters may use this video as a drinking game to drink every time I say fussy cut, because I'm going to say it a lot. There we have Dory and Nemo. And here we have tiny little salt and pepper shakers that have been fussy cut. And in this block you can see how the flamingo has been cut out to frame, to be in the center of that block. And here's a couple more examples. This is almost like a kaleidoscope quilt, and it's laurel birch fabric. And you can see that the same motif of the cat is going from one Dresden plate to the next. And here's another example of that. And I'll be showing you the tool that I used to do that in just a little bit. So now let's talk about some fabrics that are good for fussy cutting, what are good and what are not good when you're doing fussy cutting. These are some smaller scale prints. You can see the little bird. There's lots of negative space around him, which would be really good for fussy cutting. And then you also can see that it would be good to cut around that little bird. Here is a bear and pine tree fabric with lots of negative space so that it would be easy to fussy cut around the bear and pine tree. Then this is almost a medium scale print, and you can see where it has lots of negative space where it would be very easy to cut a shape out and still include those flowers in it. This Eskimo girl is another medium scale print. It would be very easy to cut her out and put her in the center of a block. Then here's that Oceana fabric again with the seahorses. Now, if I wanted to put them on the diagonal and fussy cut them so that they're standing up straight, because when they actually come off the fabric, they're going this way. So you'd have to turn them like this. You'd have to put your ruler, pretend that this piece of fabric is the ruler, on like that. You can see that you'd end up wasting a lot of fabric. And so that's why I chose to not cut that particular block as a fussy cut, but you certainly could have. Then here are some fabrics that are not very good for fussy cutting. This is a really cute little cocktail fabric, but you notice how close together all of the drinks are. It would be very hard to isolate one of those drinks. So this, where the motifs are too close together, it's not very good for fussy cutting. And this is another example of a fabric where fussy cutting wouldn't be too good, because this fabric, although it has some beautiful flowers in it, it basically reads as an all-over print, like a light tan or a light olive color. So anything that you cut out of this probably would not stand out too well. Here's another all-over print that typically would not be good for fussy cutting, but you can see that there are some leaves that are standing out a little bit stronger in this print, so that portion of the fabric would work well for fussy cutting. Here's another cave print. Again, an all-over print, probably not ideal for fussy cutting, but you can see that there are a couple little elements that you could actually fussy cut. And then here's another all-over print. Again, the flowers are a little close together, so if you were to cut out larger pieces, no matter where you cut, it's still going to probably look the same. So unless you just wanted to cut out a tiny little flower, this fabric would not work so well for fussy cutting. And I've previously shared with you, but I'm excited to share it again. This is a medium scale print, and it's part of our very first fabric line with QT Fabrics called Cocoa Chic. And although this is an all-over print, it actually would work for fussy cutting, because you could actually cut out squares around these circles, or you could actually cut out diamonds as well. This is another fabric in our Cocoa Chic line, and it's maroon with these little flowers and these little gray circles. And you would be able to, if you were cutting out smaller shapes, you could use this small scale print for fussy cutting. And then this is almost medium to large scale print, and this is another one from our line of Cocoa Chic that's coming out in January. If you sign up for my newsletter, you'll be sure to be aware of when this fabric is actually in the stores. And this one would be a really good one for fussy cutting, because you see that you could cut out squares, you could cut out circles, you could actually cut out diamonds around these shapes. This fabric works very well for fussy cutting. Then we move into large scale prints. This would actually work for fussy cutting, but the thing is, you would have to cut out a very large shape in order to get the entire fish in it. So that's why scale makes a difference, because if you wanted the entire fish, you'd have to put this in a very large block. And here's another large scale print. This one happens to be Tampa fabric, and this happens to be Ybor City. And again, you can see it's very large. This is probably about 8 inches by 6 inches. So that's how large you'd have to cut it out in order to get the whole seen in one block. So what kind of tools do you need for fussy cutting? Well, you need a cutting mat, and a rotary cutting mat where it actually spins is really good because you want to cut around all four sides of the piece you're cutting out. So if you don't have a rotary cutting mat, you actually could place it on a smaller mat like this on your table and actually spin it around like this. That would work just as well. You need rotary cutters. This is a 45mm one, and then an 18mm one is really good for the smaller things that you're cutting out. These little Dritz plastic grippy dots are really good to put on the bottom of the ruler because it'll hold your ruler on the fabric really, really well, and these dots are easy to remove. Here's another example of some more things that could be put. This is called tighty grips, and they're little plastic circles that you could put on the back of a ruler, and it'll allow your ruler to grip the fabric really, really well. Then you need rulers. This one happens to be Quilters Select. And on the back, I don't know if you can see it, but it actually has like kind of a rough surface so that it will grip the fabric because it's kind of rough on the back. And what I've done is I've taken some washi tape, and if I were to cut out a 4.5 inch finished square, I would put the washi tape on the 4.5 inch lines, and I've also put washi tape on the 1/4 inch lines because that's where my seam allowance is going to be. And then I would actually, because the ruler you can see through, I would actually place it over the fabric and be able to see what I'm actually going to get. And so the tape helps you determine, what you're going to get. It basically gives you a window to look through. Now you know that I'm a big proponent for AccuQuilt. Now this one happens to be a studio die. A studio cutter is more industrial. It's for designers and quilt shops and guilds, and it cuts out the fabric in a cutting machine. Now this one cuts out 5-inch charm squares, and the good thing about it is that it's see-through. So you take and you put the fabric so that it's right side down, and then you'd be able to actually see what you were going to cut, so it would allow you to do fussy cutting. On a small scale print like this cowboy print, you could use a small little 2.5 inch OmniGrid ruler. You can see through it, position it over your cowboy, and cut it out. Now I've actually placed some tape on the back of this to help grip the fabric, because as you're rotating, as you're cutting, you want that ruler to stay in place. So this tape is called Next Care by 3M, and it goes on the ruler real easy, and it also comes off really easy. Bird fabric is really good for fussy cutting, and so I'm using a 2.5 inch by 6 inch Quilters Select ruler, or I'm sorry, Creative Grids ruler, and you could actually position that right over the word love and cut just the word love out. And speaking of that, don't forget to give those thumbs up and those hearts. So here's another method for being able to determine what you're going to get ahead of time. You take a regular piece of cardstock, and on one side of it you cut out a 4-inch window, which is actually what you're going to end up getting. Then inside you cut out another window, which is 4.5 inches, which is the size you're going to cut. So you take and position it over to see what you're going to get, and then you open it up, and you can take pieces of freezer paper, and you position the freezer paper right inside of that square, and then iron it onto the fabric, and then you'd be able to take this cardstock off and basically cut around the freezer paper. So you might want to do a paper piecing block, and you might want that yellow square to actually be something that's fussy cut. So in order to do that, you would print out your paper foundation and you would cut the little yellow square out. Then you would take your fabric and position the magic window over your fabric so you can see that you're going to get just that mushroom. And then what you do is you take and you open the fabric from the back, and you take and position the foundation over it again so you can see I'm still getting the mushroom. Then you take a glue stick and you put some glue on that open spot, and you take and glue the yellow square down, and then you remove this and cut around the yellow square. There are some rulers that are designed specifically for fussy cutting. This one is a 3.5-inch ruler by Quilt in a Day, and you can see that it has an X in the middle of it, and it also has the 1/4-inch seam allowance all the way around. So that's to allow you to perfectly center your design within the ruler. There's also a film that's on the back of this ruler, and that again helps the ruler grip the fabric so that it doesn't slide while you're cutting all 4 sides. And the grip that's on the back is called Invisi-Grip. And you just cut it out slightly smaller than your ruler and put it on. It works really, really well. You've probably heard of English paper piecing. That's where you cut out paper templates and then you cut out your fabric a 1/4 inch larger than that. And there's a real famous quilt called La Passacaglia, and they create little templates, and you can take one of those templates, like perhaps this diamond, and the shape that's inside is where you would cut out your paper pieces, and then the outside has the 1/4 inch on it. So you basically position it over the motif that you want to cut out, and then you'd be able to get that tiny little flower in the center of that diamond. Here is that laurel birch fabric that I showed you earlier, and this is a metal Dresden plate ruler, and it has sandpaper on the back. And basically you cut out a piece of template plastic that's the same size as the ruler, and you can put marks on it, which allows you to put a mark so that you can place this ruler in the exact same position on the motif over and over and over again. There are many, many different rulers that you can use for fussy cutting. You could use an equilateral triangle. You could use a Dresden plate ruler. You could use a hexagon. You could use a small little triangle, a smaller hexagon and triangle, a 60-degree diamond, and a 45-degree diamond. Well, I hope you've enjoyed our discussion about fussy quilts today. I hope you maybe learned a couple tricks of how you might be able to do it. Coming up next at 7 o'clock is Cherry Goodry. She is one of the organizers of this fantastic event, and she's with Cherry Blossom's Quilting Studio. So she's at 7 o'clock. And if you go to my previous postings, you'll see a link to go directly to her. And thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.